Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we are continuing our discussions of this week about coronavirus, about the pandemic, about COVID-19, about whatever the heck it is that we're going to call it, but most importantly about how businesses can and should be succeeding during this time. And so I am just absolutely delighted to be speaking today with Karl Post. So please join me in welcoming Karl to our program. Welcome, Karl.
Well, thank you, Deb. It's a pleasure to be your guest today on the Business Power Hour. Thanks for having me.
Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this discussion. So Karl Post is the co-founder of the C-Suite Network. Yes, that C-Suite Network, the one that I am very proud to be affiliated with. So C-Suite Network is the world's most trusted network for C-Suite executives, along with business celebrity Jeffrey Hayzlett, who is his other co-founder. His distinguished background includes international franchising, business consulting, and corporate business development. Karl served a variety of roles at Eastman Kodak, including worldwide marketing and corporate business development, before moving on to be working with Jeffrey. So again, Karl, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and I'm really excited to kind of talk about how our organization has approached this kind of new macro business trend, kind of called COVID-19 or the coronavirus.
Right. Right. Well, again, full disclosure, I am part of C-Suite Network, but I don't benefit from anything that we're going to be talking about today other than being part of C-Suite Network. But let's go back just a little bit. Mention that you had originally, or not originally, but you were with Eastman Kodak, and things. How is it that you discovered that working with C-Suite level executives is your passion?
I was very fortunate in the early part of my career, even before I started with Eastman Kodak, to work in the franchising industry.
Oh, okay.
And I worked, happened to be in the graphic arts and printing industry. The company was called Sir Speedy Printing and Pip Printing. And I consider myself very fortunate to have started my career there because I learned three very important models for business very early on in my career. The first was our business of franchising. The franchisor-franchisee business relationship is a very interesting relationship. Back when I was involved, the relationship with your customer was for 20 years.
Right.
I don't know of many other business relationships that when you start are intended contractually to last for 10 years, 20 years. And when they renewed, they would renew for another 10 years.
Right.
And so I was very fortunate to learn that business model and the requirements for that relationship to be successful from the franchisor and the franchisee's perspective. When you look at how business changes so quickly and even faster today, when we first signed people up, there was no website, there was no email.
Right.
And in a couple of years, we had to adapt and adopt a program to support over 1,100 locations in 23 countries with websites, email, and so on and so on and so on as we've watched digital marketing evolve over the years. So that was one business model. The second was that the franchisees we were putting in business, they were small business owners. They generally left a professional career and made a decision to become an entrepreneur. And they decided that they wanted to open a printing business, and then they picked our brand to do so. And as I helped them embark on that 20-year relationship and opening their business, I got a chance to watch all of the challenges that come with entrepreneurship and starting a small business: employee management, financial management, marketing and sales. And these businesses averaged about $1 million in sales per year. So they were genuinely small businesses,
Mhm.
many times family operated. So I was also exposed to a lot of family dynamics in
Mhm.
business, whether it was succession or just daughter or son coming home from school and going to work with mom and dad.
Mhm.
So I saw small business as well. And then the third business model, we were a very big customer for some very big companies, IBM,
Mhm.
Xerox, Eastman Kodak. And I had a chance to interface with very large companies on how they supported our organization as well as our franchisees.
Mhm.
And that early part of my career really lasted 10 or 12 years. But what it did is it really instilled in me a couple of things: entrepreneurship, the respect for small business, the opportunities that big business bring. And I really got a nice overall perspective on business. And that's done well for me throughout the rest of my career.
Mhm. Right. And then you met Jeffrey,
Good, good.
who is a force unto himself. But talk to us about why you guys decided to start the C-Suite Network.
Well, I'll tell you, I was with Jeff. I've known Jeff since 1993, so a long time. He was in the graphic arts industry as well.
Mhm.
I worked for him for 4 years at Eastman Kodak while he was the chief marketing officer. And we left Eastman Kodak together, a little bit tired of big business,
Mhm.
a little bit tired of the things that come with operating within a large corporation. And when he and I left, we were using that term lifestyle business. We wanted
Mhm.
to start a lifestyle business. And so we went with what we had at the time, and that was Jeff's brand. So our first business was called the Hayzlett Group after Jeffrey
Mhm.
Hayzlett, and it was focused on a book he wrote that became a best-selling book. And that best-selling book launched his career as a professional speaker, went on to writing 3 additional books. He was a primetime television host, appeared on MSNBC, was one of the talking heads on Bloomberg and
Mhm.
many others. And he was very well respected as a senior executive coming out of what was at one time certainly a Fortune 100 company.
Mhm.
He was also respected for having adopted cutting edge trends in marketing.
Mm.
This is 2006 through 2010 while we were
Mhm.
at Kodak, and it was very unheard of for big companies to adopt social marketing,
Mhm.
social media, to adopt mobile. Mobile was just on the cutting edges,
Right.
right? The Apple iPhone and all the apps that were being developed in it
Mhm.
were a big part of what was happening with marketing. SEO was soon to come, and Jeff was a visionary around those types of topics, really adopted them at a Fortune 100 company, which was rare at the time. So he was very well respected coming out of that. Went on to speak around the world on various topics related to the digital marketing, the role of a CMO. And what that led us to ultimately was Jeff's television show.
Mhm.
And Jeff hosted a primetime television show on Bloomberg called The C-Suite with Jeffrey Hayzlett.
Mhm.
And so now you're starting to get the C-Suite story.
Mhm.
And the C-Suite with Jeffrey Hayzlett, the premise of the show was sometimes companies, big companies, have to make very big decisions. And those decisions are generally made inside a boardroom.
Right.
And the theme of the show was we wanted to investigate and talk about some big decisions that companies made. And we wanted to go inside the boardroom and talk to the senior executives
Mm.
about how they made
Mhm.
those decisions. So we ran about a season and a half of that show on Bloomberg, interviewing and speaking with companies the like of MGM,
Mhm.
Cadillac, Domino's Pizzas, all who went through a significant business transition. And we were interviewing the senior executives about how that happened.
Mhm.
We had no idea how well people would respond to hearing those stories. Not everybody gets inside the boardroom. Jeff
Mhm.
served inside the boardroom
Right.
as an officer for Eastman Kodak.
Mhm.
Not everybody gets that. In fact, we talk about how many officers there really are in Fortune 100
Mhm.
companies. You figure 5 officers per
Mhm.
company, there's 500 in the world.
Right.
You think about the Fortune 100 at any given time. So you talk about, from a business perspective, the pinnacle of success.
Mhm.
But we had no idea just how responsive people would be to coming inside that boardroom and hearing about these decisions and how they went about them, how they were brought up, who admitted to them, right? They made some really tough decisions.
Mm-hmm.
We ultimately moved that show online because Bloomberg, while a wonderful brand, isn't really the largest television network out there. And we were getting more traction online.
Right.
Bloomberg had not yet really figured out their online model.
Mm-hmm.
And so we moved that show online. And it was through that process of investigating and having that conversation that we thought, well, not only do other people want to know what C-suite executives do, but C-suite executives often might want to visit with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we initially started out thinking, let's launch the CEO network.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, you know what, that might just be too narrow because there are many, many organizations people can choose from to spend time, both vertically on a role, whether you're a CO, CFO, CMO, plenty
Mm-hmm.
of organizations to participate in. We thought, you know what we want to do? We want to focus on providing growth, development, and networking for senior executives,
Mm-hmm.
primarily from the C-suite, but not everybody has a
Mm-hmm.
C-suite title. There's plenty of people running really large business
Mm-hmm.
units inside companies that
Right.
could stand alone.
Right. I mean,
So
they've got billion-dollar budgets. They're, and they're manager of whatever.
absolutely, and they're not quite in the C-suite, but
Mm-hmm.
they're faced with the same challenges.
Mm-hmm.
One of the themes in Jeffrey's book is one of Jeff's books is the only difference between Main Street and Wall Street is the number of zeros.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has the same
Right.
challenges. And that brings me back to my early days of my career: employee management,
Mm-hmm.
financial management, sales management, marketing, all of the key challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But what we wanted to do, and it's a little bit different than people might compare us to a Vistage or a YPO, we're not necessarily mentoring based organizations. We're not necessarily focused on here's how you grow in your role, although
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of people who want to punch above their weight. How do they get there? Tell
Mm-hmm.
me how I get to the C-suite. But we wanted to focus on macro trends in business,
Mm-hmm.
and the themes that we put to that are reach, relevancy, and reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
And those three elements drive all of the activities that we put together inside the C-suite network, while we look at macro trends, how they're impacting business, and then how do we take that content and make it available to our members.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what I love, and I've been part of C-suite now for almost 2 years, and what I love about it is it's not just for the billion-dollar companies. When you look at the numbers here in the U.S., they say that 95% of all businesses in the U.S. are what the government calls small business. Now that's still, I mean, some of those are big business. I mean, they're million-dollar companies, but the issues and challenges that a one-person shop faces are often, many times what somebody bigger faces. Is it the same size as, say, a huge company? No, but still interesting. I mean, and for some small businesses, I mean, they want to grow, and so they know, or they need to know, how are you dealing with employment issues? How are you dealing with, and we're going to talk about this, obviously, pandemic, health issues, all of those things. And so it really doesn't matter. And I tell people all the time, I'm a CEO. And so, I'm C-suite. And then of course, we have all the people that, they have to have cute titles, they're C something that they've made up. But, but yeah, again, it doesn't matter. Manager, director, CEO, owner, founder, whatever we want to call it, C-suite network has information that can help everybody.
Absolutely. And our strategy for addressing that is we have a broad-based membership for everybody. Mm-hmm. We talk about those macro trends, and we have content that we think is important for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then we break down our membership and how they can participate mm-hmm. into council or smaller organizations within the umbrella of the mm-hmm. C-suite network. So we might have a council on health and wellness. Mm-hmm. Very important today. You couldn't get a lot of executives to talk about that 10 or 15 years ago. But health and wellness mm-hmm. now within your organization and within your culture is a big, big topic. That's mm-hmm. one of those macro topics. Mm-hmm. We have a council addressing, a CIO council that might be addressing cyber security mm-hmm. and other macro things that are impacting businesses. So we'll break down those councils, sometimes based on role and
Mm-hmm.
responsibility, sometimes based on vertical or industry. So we have a manufacturing council
Mm-hmm.
that's closely aligned with the Manufacturing Association of America, and they coordinate and bring those big manufacturing messages, challenges, right? Because they have
Mm-hmm.
big time lobbyists and things like that
Mm-hmm.
into a conversation for the C-suite executives,
Mm-hmm.
and bring that content not at the implementation and what's happening here with this, but what's happening in the big picture, what's
Mm-hmm.
happening in the long term, what should you as a senior executive be aware of, or maybe sometimes even asking your team,
Mm-hmm.
have you looked at this? Have you
Mm-hmm.
addressed this? I'm hearing this from my peers. What's our position?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have one?
Right.
And so that's how we kind of um, um, take the content and the strategy around reach, relevancy, and reciprocity into a broader group
Mm-hmm.
and have conversations that people find relevant.
Right. And obviously there's different levels that people join, and they can check out on C-Suite Network and just, see those things. But there's also so much information that you guys have and that you offer that there's no charge for. Hello, this podcast would be a great example of that. And you have many podcasts. You also have TV, a lot of different things. So, so I encourage folks to go to C-Suite Network and just see what's there. And again, it's for the people who are just starting out, all the way up to people who have businesses that have billion-dollar budgets. And so, because business problems are business problems, there's just kind of a scale to them. And of course, our biggest business problem right now is coronavirus, and the fact that everything has shut down, and we're actually a lot of times I will record a program several weeks before it airs. We're actually recording this just a day before it airs. So this is really kind of fun. It's very timely. And so things are starting to open back up, but it's very different in different countries as to what's going on. And then when you have the United States is very different, not only by state, but by counties, by cities. And we're having to really very seriously weigh health, and the health of the employees, the health of the people we're serving, all of those various things with the economy. And businesses that simply will not survive. And it's tricky. I mean, I don't envy the people having to make those decisions in the slightest. But the cool thing is that you, as in C-Suite Network, have put together some programs to try and help businesses through this. And so that's really what we want to talk about today. So let's talk about the first one, which is C-Suite loans. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I will. In fact, what I might even start with is, like you said, big problem. We look at coronavirus, COVID-19 as certainly a macro trend impacting business. And I think we started where most business started, and that was very internally focused.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, how is this going to impact us as a business? How is this going to impact our employees? How is this going to impact their families? As this coronavirus spread and pandemic became obviously a major challenge for businesses around the world. And so we started with that internal focus, and we made a lot of the decisions that other businesses did. We have an office in New York City. So we were fortunate that we very early asked our team to begin work remotely and no longer come into Manhattan and stay at their home. We have an office in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which became a hotspot for a different reason than New York City, specific to an event inside of a meatpacking plant that continues to be a topic today. And then we had virtual people who worked in their home offices around the country. So we had, for a small organization, we had a pretty big impact for our internal team. And so we were doing all of the important things that everyone was doing about taking care of your employees, taking care of our customers, and how is it going to impact them. So we started internally. It did not take us very long to think about our business, to think about our members, our customers, our
Mm-hmm.
clients. You know, they go by lots of different names, but really for us, they're members.
Mm-hmm.
And how is this going to impact them? And yes, certainly, how is that going to impact their relationship with us, our
Mm-hmm.
business? And so we said, you know what? And you said an important word just a moment ago, and you see it throughout society. How can we help?
Mm-hmm.
Help was the important theme. And I think that unfortunately, in my personal opinion, gets lost in all of the media. Certainly there's some focus on the frontline workers more than due, and we should continue to support them as best we can. But how can we help? And I'm excited to start seeing, as we open back up, some of those stories of what I'll just categorize as help. So we said, how can we help our members? And one of the tools we put together was a business continuity guide.
Mm.
We adopted the theme of drive and thrive
Mm-hmm.
about 7 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. And we were focused on business continuity. And what we found is, in helping others, it helped us think about our own business.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped us make some good decisions. So we started around this concept of help with the business continuity guide. And today, I'll say our theme is enhanced from drive and thrive to open for business, as
Mm-hmm.
we start to see that occurring throughout the country. I've lost track of how many states are now in some
Right.
program or phase of
Mm-hmm.
open for business. But we want to support that theme, and we want to support businesses on doing that. And so we launched the business continuity guide, and it had what we called the 5 keeps.
Mm-hmm.
The first keep was keep your customers engaged. Communicate with them, talk with them about services, programs, well, heck, even collections, right?
Mm-hmm.
Collections are a big issue that even have to be addressed. But how do we stay engaged in a positive way with our customers? The second was, how do we keep our employees focused?
Mm-hmm.
For many of our employees and their families, this was a dramatic change. For those
Right.
that worked in an office and went to a home office,
Mm-hmm.
children aren't in school, we can go on and on. We're all familiar with that. But how do we keep our employees engaged? And so we did a lot to keep our employees engaged.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep your cash flowing? And that'll be kind of something that
Mm-hmm.
we talk about, very focused on how do you keep your cash flowing? Keeping some level of continuity with all the change that's going on. What
Mm-hmm.
are the things we can focus on? How can we focus on moving ahead? So
Mm-hmm.
you see how the drive and thrive. And then the final one was keep your spirit. When
Mm-hmm.
you think about business owners, when you think about business leaders, that comes with a lot of responsibility.
Right.
Whether it's employees, whether it's family, it comes with a lot of responsibility. And so we want to talk about keeping your spirit. And so our continuity guide talks about how you manage to all of those different keeps
Mm-hmm.
to try and keep your business moving forward. And certainly the financial side of it is one that required some specific focus.
Right. And I love that you talk about continuity, because I think many businesses get so focused on day-to-day operations that they don't stop to think, they don't plan for the future, and they don't even realize what they're doing. I had a client several years ago where we did business continuity planning for them. And so we went to every department, every person, and said, okay, tell us what you do and how critical it is. Is it something that if it doesn't get done for a month, the world doesn't come to an end? If it's something that doesn't get done for a day, everything stops. And of course, one of the fun things was we discovered that there were a lot of things that were very important that people didn't even think about. The mail room was one of the most critical places because people were mailing in checks. And somebody needed to go get those checks and deposit those checks. And it's funny because, we think of the mailroom as, oh yeah, that's the mailroom. I remember one of the groups that we talked with was the group of corporate attorneys who said, no, there's really, we're here if people need us, but there's really nothing that is done that, is, but so we're going through the things that they do every time. And they said, oh yeah, there is this thing that on and this was an insurance company that we were working with. And they said, there is something that we do the last day of every month. And I said, oh, what is it? And they said, oh, we've filed this form with the state insurance commission. And they said, we do it every single month. And I said, okay, what happens if you don't do that? And they said, oh, well, the company ceases to exist. I went, excuse me? So that's pretty darn important. And so not only did we do that, we also did it with people. If X person is no longer able to do their job, whether it's that they've gone on vacation or that something catastrophic has happened, what do you do with things like that? And in many cases, obviously the company would stop, especially if it is a very key critical person like a CEO. But many of the very important people also discovered that they weren't as important as they thought they were, because there were so many other people who could step up and fill that role. And so it was just a matter of planning and thinking things through. And I think, a part of all of this coronavirus stuff has made people think of that. And some of it is even just, do we have to be in the same physical location? Do we have to have an office? Do we really have to be spending this much rent on having all of these people here? Can our employees' home office, can they be working at midnight and getting their jobs done? Do we have the technology? It goes all the way back to, what is it, $6 million man? We have the technology. So continuity planning, I think, is something that a lot of people are really having to stop and think about during this time that they never thought they were going to be thinking about.
So important. And when you think about that continuity, that brings us kind of back to access to capital.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
we can maintain continuity. I think there are some things we've known about business for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs access to capital. Mm-hmm. On the smaller end of businesses, most businesses are underfunded. Mm-hmm. We're finding out now that there's some pretty big businesses that are underfunded as well. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs access to capital. And that very quickly became a focus for us as we were visiting with our members, mm-hmm. as we were hearing the challenges, and we cover the span of very diverse businesses from mm-hmm. small to large, whether you right. want to measure that on revenue or employees. And we were hearing access to capital. Mm-hmm. And so we said, wow, you know what? We could use some access to capital too. And so we started researching it again internally for ourselves. And then we said, how is this important to our members and other mm-hmm. businesses as a whole? And how do we integrate this into our business continuity guide? And so included in the business continuity guide is a section around access to capital. Mm-hmm. And some of it's obvious and some of it maybe not so obvious, or mm-hmm. some of it new and very confusing. The more obvious is, well, access to cash, the least expensive cash, is probably going to be through an existing banking relationship.
Right.
Right. But we also know one of those old adages in business is, well, when you ask for the money and need it is probably when they're not most interested right. in giving it to you, right?
Everybody's been asking for it.
Everybody's asking, and then you have to go through the qualification, and they have mm-hmm. very rigorous qualification, and they have guidelines that they follow, mm-hmm. and they're not pandemic guidelines, by mm-hmm. the way. They're traditional.
Right. So, they want to know if you've got a marketing plan. They want to see your P&L. I mean, all of that stuff that they really should be looking at.
And it might take weeks or months
mm-hmm.
to move through that process. So a good business has access to capital, has that mm-hmm. banking relationship, has a line of credit, has prepared for a rainy day. Mm-hmm. Not everybody can do that. And mm-hmm. not every day is the same rainy day. This mm-hmm. pandemic situation is certainly the rainiest day that we have ever mm-hmm. encountered in business. And so we talk about start with where you might have or might need to establish a local banking relationship. Mm-hmm. Cost of money is something to consider anytime you're getting money, mm-hmm. but at other times it may not be as important. Other factors get
mm-hmm.
important. We then did all of our research with the SBA, and at the time there were the traditional SBA offerings available, mm-hmm. and they have a series of programs available for small business. And then as we continued to watch, the CARES Act was in debate, and they released the CARES mm-hmm. Act, and obviously the CARES Act included several programs.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went in and evaluated the Paycheck Protection Program. Mm-hmm. I think most everyone's probably available to that, but it was designed to provide a direct incentive for small businesses to keep their workers on the payroll,
Mm-hmm.
to keep them working, to not put them on unemployment. Certainly part of the CARES Act also included incremental unemployment benefits,
Mm-hmm.
but this was their way of saying, we want to help businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So we very quickly researched, came to understand that, and started sharing with our members our view and what was happening with the paycheck protection program.
Mm-hmm.
And so that came out. It's changed now, but it's back again,
Mm-hmm.
and businesses are once again applying. So we think that's a great source of capital and a place that you should look first.
Mm-hmm.
They also offer their what they call EIDL, their economic injury disaster loans,
Mm-hmm.
and they were making immediate advances. Well, immediate's a difficult term, but
Right. They didn't write you the check right then, but it wasn't a month later.
It was immediate, but you could get 1,000, and it also changed,
Mm-hmm.
just as the Paycheck Protection Program changed as it was implemented. Initially, you could apply for up to $1,000 per employee on the advance.
Mm-hmm.
They then capped that at 10 employees because they ran out of funds there, just as
Mm-hmm.
they did in the initial implementation of the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. I might just have to start saying, as it's better known. So we encourage people to look at and file for the EIDL, and many people qualified and started receiving those advances, and
Mm-hmm.
those were nice short terms. And then you go through a bigger loan process to borrow up to $10 million
Mm-hmm.
if you need it under the EIDL disaster
Right.
program. The SBA also offers bridge loans
Mm-hmm.
when you need cash quickly. Now, the challenge with that is you have to have an existing relationship with a federal lender who's involved in the SBA and can support that.
Mm-hmm.
So as we looked at all of those options, we said, wow, there's not a perfect fit. There rarely is, but what more could we do?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did is we partnered with a company called Vetted, and we launched C-Suite Loans.
Mm-hmm.
And C-Suite Loans was designed where businesses need immediate access to capital. They can go online to our website at csuiteloans.com. They can fill out a very short application form for the initial consideration for anywhere from $5,000 to $5 million. And within 24 hours, that application gets presented to multiple, up to as many as 25 different lending organizations.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Those lending organizations then, through the automated platform, can submit their offering to you, and you can be in the loan process very quickly. So we looked at doing that as an alternative, as an option, as a consideration where SBA is too slow, my current lender, I don't fit their criteria right now. Now, will this money maybe be a little more expensive? Something to consider and evaluate. But by getting competitive offers from multiple institutions based on your independent application, your credit worthiness, you have options to look at. And then it was really the speed at which they could accept your application, respond to your application, and move you into okay, now we have to collect a little more paperwork, right? Now they're not asking for that marketing plan you mentioned, but they are asking for P&L. They're asking for bank statements. And there's a few things that you have to submit. And then those loans can fund very, very quickly. So access to capital and getting that money while you were waiting for the PPP funds to come through, especially if you didn't make it through the first funding amount. Hopefully businesses that didn't are in the application process and getting access to the capital they need to keep their business driving and thriving, keeping their employees on the payroll, keeping them off of the unemployment line.
Right. And this has been a learning process because we've never had to do this before. There have been times where there have been, situations, but certainly nothing to these extremes and nothing currently. There's no way that we compare to the Great Depression. I mean, you can't, and when people try and do that, I'm just perplexed. But there, and unfortunately, because we haven't been through this before, things went wrong. I mean, we all knew, we've all heard about the Ruth Chris, and the PR person in me was thinking, oh, wasn't there some PR person going, don't do this? No. But they qualified. I mean, and so they thought, well, hey, we qualify, we should apply. And, and a variety of things, and when Harvard gets loans, I mean, you're like, yeah, really? But so it is tricky, and so, yes, they ran out of money. I don't think they ever figured that this was going to happen. And then you have to balance it with a couple things. The first is the fact that most people don't have a relationship with their banker. Long gone are the days when you walk in with your little checks and they call you by name and you deposit them because you're using your phone to deposit at the branch, all these various things. So people just didn't have, we don't have relationships with our bankers. Unless you are a very large customer, they don't know who you are. And then now we have the issue of the employees who make more money on unemployment because of that extra bump that they have put in there. We had a situation here in Atlanta where a small business owner applied for the PPE. She got it. She was so thrilled. She thought, oh my God, this is so much fun. And her employees were mortified because they made more per paycheck on unemployment. Right. And she said, I actually got death threats. And it was, and she's like, when they're not coming back to work for me, but yeah, I mean, we're having to work through these. And so I like that you've put together this resource where people can at least, it's another option for people to explore.
Right. Our goal was to help, to provide that option, to provide access. And it was very well received. So that's always nice when you take the time to put together a program, whether it's our business continuity guide and a number of individuals or businesses that have downloaded it and taken advantage of that, to applying through the C-Suite Loans program. It's always nice to know that it's being used and that it was worth our time. And that's a good feeling for us.
Right.
So our hope is that as many of, whether it's our members, and it's not exclusive to just members of the C-Suite network, any small business can actually apply for a C-Suite loan through our website. And so the more businesses that we can help, if they get access to that capital, keep their folks employed, and can move forward, and as we open for business, then that's what is really most important to us.
Right. And it is tricky to even figure things out. I had a business associate who told me, even if you don't need it, get it. Right. And I was thinking, he said, you can pay it back right away, but in case, and he said, but then it's there if you need it. Well, I'm still, of the, and maybe it's more, I thought, okay, I don't need it, so I'm not going to apply for it because there are others who do, and I don't want to be taking from them. But that is certainly a rationale, is I don't need it right now, but I might. So why not take advantage of it? And it's just it really is totally uncharted territory.
Yeah, and I think we had lots of conversations on that as it related to the PPP program in particular, because that does become a grant. If there are any listeners that aren't familiar with it, the Paycheck Protection Program is initiated as a loan.
Right.
And if you follow the guidelines with that particular program, it becomes a grant. So there were a lot of businesses that were very incented to get it. And we had lots of conversation around, well, there's businesses who need it immediately. And you can categorize some of those businesses. Some of the more retail-oriented businesses were impacted very quickly, right? Our public relations business, we didn't have to see our clients on a daily basis, right? We could still function and do some of our work. But you look at the businesses that were forced to close and immediately were taking in daily cash receipts that were gone. They were certainly the front lines on the business side. There are others where it was going to happen a little more slowly. And I didn't think personally that those funds would run out, but I knew there was going to be a long line. And so I took the approach, and in our discussions with people, get in line, file, receive, and then make a decision on what you do with it.
Right.
And so being prepared, back to continuity, and lending itself. And I think we've all learned a lot about this process. and what's happened with this pandemic and how important some of those, whether it's the
Mhm.
mailroom or some other underlying processes
Mhm.
that aren't visible to us that make our businesses
Mhm.
go on a daily basis. I think all of us are much more in tune with just how directly a little tweak here
Mhm.
can have a really big impact over here.
Right.
And that's what we've tried to prevent
Mhm.
as we get people to focus on open for business.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, and as you mentioned, in various states we are opening back up for business, and it's staggered. There's all sorts of rules, a variety of things. But one of the biggest things is as companies are opening up for business, there are requirements. Now, some of them, are just okay. You have to have a certain amount of space between people. So if it's say an office, okay, your desk is not you're not on top of the person right next to you, all sorts of things like that. But for many businesses, they have supplies that they all of a sudden have to have. They have to have face masks. They have to have protective gowns. They have to have gloves. And, unfortunately, you just don't walk into CVS or Walgreens or Walmart anymore to buy those things if you ever could. And so that's the other business that you have started is a supply company. So tell us more about that.
Yes, and it comes back to that theme of help.
Hmm.
As we open for business, we realized that every business is most likely going to need some access to personal protection
Hmm.
equipment, PPE. So another couple of P's there to go with our PPP.
I know there's too many P's, and I just about said something really bad there.
And what we saw was that there was going to be a need for businesses to be ready. And
Mhm.
so we actually started this a couple weeks ago because we knew business was going to open sometime.
Mhm.
President Trump has been unrelenting on his point,
Mhm.
making that point on a regular
Right.
basis. The governors are now enacting it independently in the various states. But we said, what we need to think ahead here. Help and continuity. What's next?
Mhm.
How can we help businesses think ahead? The last thing you want to do is suddenly say you're open for business,
Mhm.
but it just happened in California. Some retail locations are now open to curbside business.
Mhm.
You're open for retail, curbside pickup, and everyone bringing something to the curb has to wear a mask.
Right. And you're
Oh,
like,
where do I
okay,
get
where
the
do we
mask?
get masks?
I don't have masks. So now I can open,
Mhm.
but I can't meet the guidelines.
Mhm.
So we tried to anticipate the requirements and the needs of businesses, not frontline workers,
Mhm.
not essential
Right.
businesses,
This is not medical. Mhm.
but this is getting back to work
Mhm.
businesses, Main Street getting back to work. And when we started investigating it, wow, was there a lot going on.
Mhm.
Every big news article was fraud, this and
Mhm.
things disappearing, and there was a lot of gray black market and outright fraud
Mhm.
occurring on very big issues. There was a very large order in the state of California. A union was purchasing them and then reselling them to hospitals, and they didn't exist.
Oh.
The FBI's involved, so we were
Mhm.
like, "Oh wow, we should be very careful
Mhm.
here. What's going on? We don't want to be perceived as taking advantage of the market." And so it was very important to us as we looked at help, and our theme became protect your most valuable asset, your people.
Mhm.
And we said, what are the requirements there? First and foremost is the internal relationship. I work at a desk next to someone, I'm going
Mhm.
back to that desk,
Mhm.
and I want to be in an environment where I'm comfortable and protected. I
Mhm.
don't know that we know what that is yet, but we know
Right. Right. Mhm.
abilities and some potential. And I've been thinking back when I sat in an office and someone sneezed 4 or 5 times, you looked at them and said, go home, you're going to get everyone else sick.
Yeah. Or you're like, yeah.
Yeah. Or you stay away.
Mhm.
Well, today, someone sneezes and it's a whole, it's a very
Mhm. Right.
visceral.
You immediately step back.
And so it starts internally. How do we protect our employees internally and get back to work amongst each other?
Mhm.
And then how do we interact with our
Mhm.
customers or people outside of our business?
Right.
So we wanted to put together a program that gave some thought to that, and could also be a trusted resource.
Mhm.
So we have launched C Suite Supplies, c-suitesupplies.com, where you can go in and you can order a wide variety of PPE, from gloves to masks to gowns. We're also even going to integrate, we're working with a couple of companies now to integrate testing programs into the site.
Right.
And so what we've done is we've taken our brand and put our brand on it, and we have gone through and verified the source, verified that when they make claims about levels of protection or FDA approval, that they are real,
Right.
all the way to and including we have representatives in China, not someone who flew there to look at someone, but people who are based there, in business there, who are evaluating the channels that we have for bringing the product in. What is beneficial now is the channels has opened up a little bit. They were very constricted a few weeks ago. You see the conversations between the federal government and the states competing for the same product coming available, right? So they were calling it the wild, wild west, and they put in some very strict measures around that. So we have really taken a look at, understand all the compliance. We have our process for ensuring trust in the product. And then most importantly, it's at a fair price.
Right.
We are
and we'll be honest, it's a business. You're going to make money, but you're not making, it's not like, the like you were saying, some of the places that marked things up, we've all seen, the hand sanitizer that yesterday was $5, today it's $50. No, that's not what you guys are doing. You're charging a fair price.
Absolutely. And we disclose all of that on the homepage of the website to make you feel comfortable about the resource that you're choosing, because there are many, many sites you can go to purchase PPE. And what we wanted to say to our employees, and we've now made this available to our employees. So like I started our conversation, internally focused first, externally. Now we make it available to our members who are familiar with us, who trust us, who have a existing relationship with us. We make it available to the members, and then we've made it available to businesses at large as well. So we're promoting it as a trusted source to come in and purchase PPE at a fair and competitive price.
Right. And it's funny, these are things that we will need going forward. And, we've talked about continuity and things like that. Things have happened, just not to the scale. One of the things that I think of is Hurricane Katrina. There were so many things where people needed masks, they needed gloves, they needed things like this because of sanitation issues. And so, businesses need to be prepared for some of these things. It's something as simple as, oh my gosh, you've got a couple people in your office that have the flu. Okay, what do you need to be doing to make sure that everybody else is protected and safe? And yes, a business owner has, altruistic reasons. They want to make sure that their business continues, but they also are caring for their employees. So I mean, it's a balancing act. Because you're going to have an employee who is, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. I'm not coming back into the office until you can guarantee that I'm perfectly safe. Well, they're not coming back. I mean, that's just the way it is. And then, as we were talking about this before the program started, you got some of the people that are like, yeah, whatever. And so you kind of meet halfway in the middle. And then obviously, if there are specific guidelines, there are businesses that are being told, restaurants, great example, masks, gloves, things like that. We went to a nursery, not a people nursery, a plant nursery, over the weekend, and everybody had to have a mask. Now, of course, I had a mask. I mean, that's just, I go in with my mask, but they had a box of masks. They had a certain number of people they were allowing in. And if you did not have a mask, you did not go in. I mean, it was just that simple. And so people could choose. Yeah, I don't want to wear a mask. Okay, fine. Then, we can, and so they gave them the option. You can shop online. We'll load it into your car. But yeah, so these are things that will be continuing that, we need to think about whether, and hopefully it's not coronavirus, but there's going to be some other little cootie that comes along or a natural occurrence or something.
And I think we're all much more aware of those and paying attention to that. I personally have adopted a theme of respect.
Right.
I respect you. I respect your opinion. I respect your choice to wear a mask. I respect your choice to stay home. I don't know if you have an underlying condition necessarily. I don't know if you are part of the vulnerable population in the words of today. I don't know if you're just a little more scared of germs than I am every day. And
Right.
people who feel that way. And so my personal theme is respect. Um, and it's caused us to also look ahead, right? As we look ahead to opening for business, as we look ahead to getting back to work, there's a few things we're paying attention to. I think there's going to be a lot of conversation around liability. And we're seeing President Trump actually legislate out liabilities so that our business can flow in certain industries. And I think there's going to be all the way down to OSHA compliance and things like that over time that will be impacted. And I think some of that will require legislation in order for us to get back to work.
Right. Right.
And to start to get back to, I think people are saying a new normal, but get back to a model of doing business that allows us to be successful. And so as we look ahead, it's that the two big things we're focused on is that trend of bringing people back together, the associated liabilities that businesses need to be aware of when considering that, even down to providing PPE.
Right.
Those are a couple of the most important things that we think. And then really above all else is continue to keep your spirit up, going back to our 5 keeps.
Right.
This will not be easy. I don't think we'll do the hardest part yet. I can only imagine the process of getting what I think is now over 30 million people who filed for unemployment in less than a month, getting them all back to work and productive part of our working society. So we have some things ahead of us, but at the C-Suite Network, we're focused on our business. We're focused on our members. We're focused on the partners that we work with, and we'll stay focused on those 5 keeps as a guideline for what we focus on next to help everybody be open for business.
Right. And things will change. And it's funny. One of my other guests for this series this week has said we shouldn't be going back to anything because back in many cases wasn't working. Maybe it's one of the things that has fascinated me are the pictures of the lack of air pollution and how that changed so quickly. I think we're going to look at working hours, flexible schedules, obviously working more from home. But, you mentioned the fact that, we need to be working on our mental health. This is difficult, especially if you have employees that you're worrying about, because you're worrying that obviously your business goes forward. I mean, you certainly don't want to lose that, but you're worrying about your employees. You're worrying about you're worrying about your family. You're worrying about your own health. And so, we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves right now.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. Absolutely. Taking care of yourself, taking care of your team, you have to start there, and everything else you can build on it.
Right. Right. Yeah, because when you've taken it's with anything. If you've taken care of yourself, then it starts flowing out from there.
Absolutely.
Well, Karl, oh my gosh, we are almost at the top of the hour, and I know you're doing lots of these, and so we want to be very mindful of your time. Tell us again where people find the resources.
Well, they can go to csuitenetwork.com. It's c-suitenetwork.com to learn all about the C-Suite Network. If you're interested in the loans program, it's c-suiteloans.com, c-suiteloans.com. And for the PPE, c-suitesupplies.com. Any of those 3 locations will get you to the resources that you need to help you be open for business.
Great. Well, if somebody wants to reach out and connect with you, how do they do that?
They can reach me at my email address, which is karl.post, KARL.post @Hayzlett, HAYZLETT.com.
Perfect. I love it. Well, do you have any final words that you want to leave everyone with?
I was just thinking about the focus first, and I have three young, well, not so young boys anymore. They're 13, 15, and 17. I tend to focus on them first,
Hmm.
so they get my first attention.
Hmm.
So I would say family first. I
Hmm.
focus on my family. I focus on myself. I focus on our business, and I focus on our members. And I think if you follow that path, you'll find some level of success and not miss the right priority.
Perfect. I love it. Well, hopefully we can have another chat sometime where we're talking about things that are much more positive than a pandemic, because this is fascinating. I love knowing about all the resources and things that you provide. And yes, again, I am part of C-Suite Network, but I am very proud of that. I love the fact that I'm part of such a great organization. And so I love that. But until the next time we talk, I'm Deb Creer. Been having an absolutely fascinating discussion with Karl Post, and everyone have a great day.
Thanks for having me, Deb.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.